Calir Obscur, Expedition 33. This is a beautiful game and probably my personal game of the year. It's a game filled with beautiful story of loss and grief, but there is a certain perspective and a thought that I had as I was finishing up this game last night. More so looking at one of the alternative endings. A little bit of a dialogue about why I believe Myel to be the true villain of this story. Roll the intro. Let's talk about it.
You're now watching The Captain.
So first and foremost, I want to talk about how beautiful and amazing this game is. For me, I am a guy that usually prioritizes a story-based game in general. Like if I could play nothing but single player story-based games that are amazing like this, or God of War, or Ghost of Tsushima, or Ghost of Yote that's probably gonna come out later this year, I would play those games no problem the rest of my life. Love multiplayer games, but there's something pure about a game with this great of a story, and I think these kind of games are honestly the backbone of the gaming industry. Getting into this game, there's a certain perspective I had at the end of it, and for people that are watching this video, yes, there are spoilers for this game's ending and the story of this game all in all. So if you haven't played the game, please leave the video, go play the game, please, and then come back and we'll have this dialogue. But for people that have, let's get into it. So I do want to have a little bit of a brief description, or at least an explanation on the story of this game. And I'm more so going to focus on everything that happens outside of the canvas, out of Verso's canvas. There are people within some world that have the ability to have their paintings be turned into life. These are called the painters. There's a family of these painters that are 5 people called the Desandre family. It is composed of Verso, the son, Elise, the youngest daughter, Clea, the oldest daughter, Aline, the mother, and then Renoir, the father. There is some rival faction of people that have similar powers to the painters that are called the writers, where I'm assuming that their power, their skill set kind of revolves around writing or books having kind of a similar effect that the painters do, but we have not seen them in the game yet. But for whatever reason, they're beefing. Somehow, some way, Alicia was the gateway for the writers to attack this Desandre family and light it ablaze. And within this fire, Verso, the favorite child, uses his abilities to save his younger sister and perish himself. In saving Alicia, she was kind of burned up in the process and disfigured and all kinds of other traumatic stuff. She has one eye. It's pretty grotesque. With that death happening, you could assume what a family would go through in such a situation. They're depressed, they're melancholy, they are sad about the events of losing the prodigal son. Like from what I understand, I think the game makes it very much so a point to let you know that Verso is the favorite child of the family. Everybody loves him for the most part. I think Clea, the older sister, envies him, but the mother, the father, younger sister, they love Verso. With him passing away, there's a lot of grief. The person that hits the most though is Aline, the mother. She, in seeking some kind of connection with her son, decides to take his canvas. And in this world, these paintresses and these painters have the ability to use canvases and paint almost an entire world of different stories or things within this canvas, like almost like gods. They pretty much create their own pocket dimensions. And when they create these pocket dimensions, these canvases are somehow tied to their soul. Like a part of this person's soul is connected to this canvas. Aline, the mother, decides to take the only canvas left, or maybe the only canvas that Verso ever created, use the world that he created and live within this as a way to kind of connect to him. And while she was in this world, she created copies of her family in the ways that she sees them in this point in time, because she's very upset with her husband. She creates a perfect version of her daughter. She's recreating her family within this world and living within it. And for a while, it seemed like a solid way to cope with things, and she's, getting through the grief. After a while, it becomes very apparent that she's like withering away, because for whatever reason, it seems like in this world, it works similar like astral projection, where they're putting their souls within these canvases. And if your soul's away from your body too long, you wither away and you die. So the mother, Aline, she was legit withering away. So at a certain point, the father, Renoir, decides that, hey, I need to get my wife out of here. I need to make sure that we're together and protected, because we still have a threat of the writers who just murdered our son. Keep in mind, the mother, Aline, was the head of the Painters Council. I guess it's just like council that makes decisions on what they do, and she was the head of it. So without their leader, Clea, the oldest daughter, takes over. The father, Renoir, is trying to get everything together while Clea is trying to run the council, and Elise is just kind of floating, dealing with the grief of losing her older brother and honestly feeling responsible for it to a certain extent. In Renoir's effort to get his wife to come back out of of the painting so they can get on with their lives. Aline is being very, 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 she's being very defiant, and she does not want to come out of here. She is determined to stay within this painting as long as she can, even if it costs her life. They go through this disagreement, and this disagreement causes this thing called the fracture within this world. The world of Lumiere in this world is essentially a recopy of the world that they live in on the outside that Verso created with a bunch of his different characters and things of that nature. This fracture causes this entire city or this world to essentially split in half due to the disagreement. And once it splits in half, Aline decides to create this huge stone monolith, imprison her husband within this so that he cannot destroy any of the works of art within the canvas or destroy the canvas in itself. Because at a certain point, he was letting her know, like, hey, you're not gonna come out of here. I need to make sure that you are grieving and moving on. So the only way I can do this is by taking away this vice. Because at this point, we're looking at this canvas very much so like a drug. Now in this world of Calir Obscur Expedition 33, every year we see a countdown on this monolith that the paintress is using to let everybody know that they have that is the amount of time you guys have until I'm out of power and I can't hold my husband back from destroying this world. It is a countdown from 100 down to 0. Each year that hits this countdown timer, every person, every human within this world that is that age dies. So if it hits to 35, everybody that's 35 years old perishes, and that number gets down lower and lower each year. So the people within this world are dying younger and younger and essentially becoming erased in this process that's called the gamache that happens each year. Now, this is where I want to bring in Elise, the youngest daughter that was disfigured and deformed. She is brought in by her older sister, Clea, to kind of help her dad out so we can get her mother back into the real world so they can get done what they need to get done in regards to this whole fight against the writers. She is tasked with going in and tipping the scales in her father's favor so that things can be done. When Elise goes into the painting, though, she is not as strong in the paintress or painter abilities as her mother and father, and she essentially gets rewritten in this world. Because their mother was already creating a copy of her, she essentially just took her and took her memories away and had her be reborn within this world as a whole new person with the same face and whatnot in the image of her daughter. We find out throughout the story the truth of what happens, in that Elise is going to be working with herself, the expedition of characters that we meet, as well as the clone of her brother Verso, to defeat her mother and allow her father to escape so that they can send her mother back outside of the painting into the real world so that she can recover. So that is essentially the main story of the game. There's a lot more details from different perspectives, but that's the overall synopsis of what you're going to expect from the painter part of the story, the prologue part of the story. Here is where I have a little bit of a perspective on Myel being the true villain, and Myel being the alternative name for Elise in the game. When she's reborn, she's given the name Myel within this world. Myel understands within this world, if her mother stays here for too long, she will perish, she will die, because it slowly eats away at her and she withers away. We go through this whole arc where she understands that and she continues to go through with it, and they send her mother back home. As soon as they send her mother back home, Myel, or Elise, has grown attached to this world in this sense, and she proposes to her father, hey, mom's gone. I'm more in my own mental faculties, or I'm more in the capacity to control myself. Let me stay here and enjoy some of this world, and then I'll come back to you guys and leave. Her father is like, fuck no. I'm very aware of how this world, this canvas, can seem like an intoxicating drug, especially when you're grieving and this world holds a part of your brother's soul. Because keep in mind, at a certain point in the story, we learned that their father, Renoir, had an instance in the past before he met his wife, where he himself got attached to a canvas and almost died because he stayed in there too long. These canvases become really addictive for people because you're essentially creating your wildest fantasies in your imagination and you get really attached. Add on top of that, this last lingering piece of the soul of their family member, their brother, their son, you can understand how this gets really addictive. So at this point, I'm looking at this canvas like a drug here. So keep in mind, this is the metaphor I'm gonna use for this, to frame this. This canvas is drug, it's crack in the veins. When you're moving forward and you have Myel who understands, hey, this drug is very dangerous and it's gonna wither away, kill my mother. Let me get my mother out of here so she can recover and deal with her addiction to this canvas. While in the same instance, growing her own addiction to the canvas. Father is like, hey, to be safe, I'm not gonna allow you to take this drug either. I understand you think that taking this drug in moderation can really be beneficial or you'll be safe. I don't trust it. I've seen it. I don't want to deal with this again. Myel is becoming very defiant at this point, and you see the addiction start to happen. It's that whole thing where you have that homeboy that smokes a lot or drinks a lot, and you're like, hey, bro, you may be drinking too much. And they're like, no, bro, I'm good. I'll let you know when I've had enough. I've been doing this my whole life. I know when I've had enough and where my boundaries are, where my limits are. I'll take care of this stuff. And then you see them slowly go over those limits, slowly but surely. This is kind of the story at this point in time. We go through this whole thing where Myel is obviously fighting her mother and her father. First, mother to get out of there, and then secondly, her father to stay. The fucked up thing in this family comes back to where we're in the final boss fight where Myel is trying to get her father out of the painting so he can't destroy it and she can live here. We then have her mother come back into the painting while she's on the verge of death, like withering away, and she is essentially enabling her daughter to take this drug of this canvas, and then she goes away. So they defeat the father. The father at a certain point is just like, you know what? I trust you to come out. Like, she has this whole thing of like, you have to trust me that I will come out of this canvas and won't just die here. I don't want to read into this verbatim, but we get a moment where Verso, at least the clone of Verso, is kind of letting the audience know essentially that Renoir understood that that promise that she made to him that she would come out was a false one, and that she definitely planned to live in this painting forever and die here because she doesn't feel like her life on the outside is worth living. She wants to stay within this painting with her new founded family that she's grown up with in this world in a second lifetime with. This is where I want to have this conversation. And when I say Myel is a true villain here, that's more so for clickbait, because I understand that grief will make people do a lot of illogical things that they know is not good for them. I understand that. But where I think the villainy kind of shows itself in a little bit is in the Myel ending. Because at the end of this game, you get two alternative endings you can take. You can take the ending where the clone of Verso, her older brother, lets her know that, hey, I'm tired of existing. I've been here my whole life. I don't feel like I have purpose. Like, essentially, he's just really tired of living and he doesn't want to exist anymore. And in him not wanting to exist anymore, he knows that he needs to destroy the canvas or make the canvas destroy itself, essentially, so that he can rest and that everything else can rest. But in doing so, he destroys the entire canvas because he's been immortal in this world thus far, because I think he is the piece of the soul that is kind of stuck here, or at least he's a piece of the memory that Alicia and Elaine won't let go. Like, they won't let him go, and he understands that. So he's fighting to free himself and let this canvas be and let everybody move on with their lives. The second option is you fighting as Myel, and Maelle is fighting Verso so that she can stay in this painting, keep everything together the way she wants it, and live in this fantasy until she is dead. The Verso ending is the ending I chose because it seemed like, hey, the most logical thing is, let's make this girl, this young girl, live and move on with her life and grieve and go on to live a potentially long, better life and more of what she has to offer, versus her just dying here in this memory or this fever dream of what she perceives to be her family. In the alternative version, you have Myel win this fight, rebuild the world, and bring back all the dead characters that she was in love with in regards to seeing like family, like Gustav. And at the very ending, we see the clone of Verso being forced by her. It seems like he's being like mind controlled or forced through her power. To keep in mind, in this world, in this canvas, she is literally God. She controls who lives, who dies, who's created everything. You see him almost shed a tear in just like sadness, to where he's just so tired he doesn't want to continue on. And then you cut to her where you see her using her painter's powers to literally force him to play this piano. And essentially what I like to look at it like almost telling him to dance like a monkey, like dance, monkey, dance. That ending, when I looked that up, because I didn't pick that ending, really showed me of how it really showed me how sick Myel is. And when I say sick, I don't mean she's like an evil individual, but I do think she has let this painting, this drug, corrupt her. I think when people have an addiction to something, they let that addiction lead them to do things that they would never do beforehand and really be sad in doing so. And I had a conversation with my friends where we were really kind of sitting down and deciphering a lot of the moral ambiguity here, because on one hand, you have an entire world of people who have known nothing but their life, and you're telling them that they can just cease to exist because they are the creation of a god away or a god above somewhere else. So they have their own personal life that they want to live. But on the other flip side, you have this family who is grieving, and you have this other person who is the creation of this family, who has just been learned from a very early age in his life that he essentially has no purpose outside of being the mental therapy for someone else. And I thought about it one day. I'm like, man, it's kind of fucked up that Myel would really make this man sit here and live on when he wants to die, especially when Myel had the option to leave him be and keep everyone else in this world that wants to be around. And I think it just really shows like the selfish need that her and her mother has, honestly, at the same time. Because when I'm looking at her mother is in fault for two reasonings here. One, for in a time of grief that your family is facing, you disconnect from them and abandon them and retreat into this painting. Secondly, once you go into a situation where you understand that you're gonna die and you're essentially committing self-death by staying in this painting, you understand that you then return to enable your daughter to do the same thing that you understand is sad for you. And again, I don't want to say they're just bad people outright. When I'm looking in regards in the tale of a story in regards to a protagonist and an antagonist, I'm looking at them both very much so as antagonists in the story. Because at some point they're always doing something toxic to enable someone else to have bad behavior, or two, they are harming other people in their denial to move on with death and let the memory of their son live in just that, their memory, and not just have to hold some tangible form of their family member. And again, I want to repeat that I do understand that grief is a big play in how people operate here. But there's a quote that I tend to try to live my life by to an extent, where I don't know who said it or where I heard it, but I heard it. And it essentially goes along the lines of hurt people, but being hurt is not an excuse to hurt other people. I know a lot of alliteration there, but to break this down, essentially, the trauma and the grief that these two have does not give them a get out of jail free card for traumatizing the next person and continuing this cycle of trauma. I put a lot of the onus on Aline, obviously, for being an adult in this situation and going through this trauma and just leaving her youngest daughter in a really pivotal, destructive time in her life alone to go grieve on herself. And again, I have empathy and sympathy for her and her own need to grieve. But again, I feel like when you're a parent, you really need to have a little bit of a sacrificial ideology in regards to making sure your children are okay. Because these are people that you brought into this world and you need to protect and help grow and nurture. Yes, you have your own things going on that you are susceptible to being a slave to in regards to your grief. At the same time, you gotta nut up so that you can take care of your children. Because I feel like Aline being so distant caused this cycle of trauma to continue on to Myel, and for Myel to then get so intoxicated with the memory and the thought and the love that she has within this world and the memory of her brother, that now she is forcing her own clone or her own copy of her brother to then do and dance for her like a puppet while he is crying for death. Like, he wants to end his own life, but he knows that he can't, and she won't let him go. And again, it's kind of sad because everyone else in this world, they're happy. They're living their best life. Ciel, my favorite character in the game, got her husband back, so she's happy. Everybody's happy in this world except this one person. The suffering of this one person is causing everyone else to be happy. And we're all having this happen because this one person just refuses to let go this loved one and this memory of who he is. And it's kind of sad. And from Benoit's perspective, this has to be really fucked up because it's going down the lines of you losing your son and you're losing your wife and your daughter to the same thing that your wife had to save you from. So it has to hurt knowing that your wife saw just how bad and how addictive this thing can be, and then now you're losing her to that same thing she saved you from. Again, this game and this story is so poetic, and I know the title's probably in the thumbnail really bad clickbait. I don't want to make it look like I'm vilifying Myel for going through trauma. But again, it's really just an excuse for me to be able to talk about this game and how much I love it. And right now, again, this is kind of a fresh reaction and thought process. So this isn't like a really long written out video essay on it where my thoughts are really concise. But I use these videos as more so to kind of have a conversation with the camera and have a conversation with the audience of what are your perspectives on this story, and where do you think some people had fault, and where do you think some people may have had right to feel a certain type of way? Because I think this is a beautiful story and a tale of accepting loss and what not accepting loss can do to not only yourself, but the other people you love that are still around. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are really why I look at Myel as being more so the villain in this story, because at the end, at least for her ending, she is getting what she wants and letting herself fall susceptible to the drug of the canvas and letting her own life end in an effort to just have the memory of her brother replay on repeat day in, day out, where that memory is asking you, begging and pleading for you to move on and live your life and allow them to rest. It's really poetic. It's really sad. And God, I can't wait and hope. I really hope there's a sequel to this. I don't know if this IP or the story is based off of like a novelization or anything else, but I would love to see a second game where we can maybe deep dive more into what happens here, or see more of what the writer's situation looks like, or even more of what Clea, the older sister, has to say about a lot of the stuff going on here. We get a brief mention of her, and we understand that she created one of the sets of monsters in this world to help tip the scales in her father's favor so they can get her mother out. But I feel like, you know, we didn't get to see a lot of the insight on how the death of her older brother kind of made her feel, really. But again, I love this game. This game seems like it's going to be my game of the year. I think it will be the game of the year. The only contender I see personally on the horizon right now is Ghost of Yote, because I think it's going to have a amazing story and a lot of great presentations similar to this game. And I think every other game is going to be competing for second at that point. Now, that being said, if a game comes out that surprises me, it surprises me. But as far as games that I'm aware of and somewhat familiar with, those are the two. But again, I repeat, you guys let me know in the comment section below how you felt about Myel. Do you think Myel is the real antagonist of this story, or do you believe it to be somebody else? How do you deal personally with grief and things of this nature? And how do you think they could maybe handle the story in a different way, or maybe presented something in a different manner? Or do you think this story is just perfect all around? All the things, talk to me in the comment section below. Again, I am Captain Diesel of Captain Diesel's Dojo, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.